Welcome back to my channel, Life with Toppa. Today we're going to be talking about the surviving the real streets of Washington D.C. And a lot of dudes didn't survive the real streets of Washington D.C. They got killed in D.C. and left D.C. in a body bag or a pawn box, get sent back to Jamaica or wherever they came from. Back in the days, like from the late 80s all the way to the 90s, a lot of individuals from out of New York City, they could get the drugs cheap, so they took the drugs and brought it down to Washington, D.C., where they could get more money for it, because they couldn't really survive in New York City, because if you didn't have a crew behind you, you couldn't really survive in Washington, D.C. You could actually not Washington, D.C., you couldn't survive in New York. You had to have a crew. So therefore, if you didn't have a crew, but you still could get the drugs cheaper, it would make more sense instead of actually going up a next crew, shooting back and forth, and ain't nothing gonna come out of that. It's all about the money. So dudes was taking their drugs and bringing it down to Washington D.C., which is considered the DMV, which is Maryland, Northern Virginia, all of that combined together with D.C. meant DMV. So they took the drugs out of New York, and a lot of Jamaicans from New York too was coming out of New York and coming to D.C. because D.C. was the place. D.C. where you could make a lot of money. Dudes had drug strip that was making hundreds and $100,000 a night. Actually, not even a night, in 3 hours. In 3 hours, you could make $100,000 having a drug hands in Washington, D.C. That's how D.C. was pumping back in the days. But a lot of dudes took their work, came to Washington, D.C., and a lot of them didn't make it back out. Why? Because Washingtonians didn't take a liking to dudes who came from out of town and came to Washington to hustle. Now, they didn't take a liking to that. So therefore, they was on a mission themselves. They was killing everything that was a Washingtonian that came to Washington, and you was hustling and was getting money. It's either you was going to pay extortion tax or they was going to kill you. And that was a fact. That's one of the things that sparked the murder rate in Washington, D.C. And the shit just went out of hand because dudes was getting killed left, right, and center, especially after Alpo did what he did in Washington, D.C. They didn't like nothing came from New York City. Nothing. After Alpo did what he did, he testified, actually told on Wayne Perry. After that, that was a wrap. They didn't like nothing came from out of New York City. They was killing everything that came. If you was from New York City, your life was in danger being in Washington, D.C. Real talk. If you was from New York City, you was in D.C. hustling, your life was in jeopardy. You was gonna lose your life, or you gotta be on your guard, period. And any nigga that was actually in the street at that time, they would tell you. After Alpo did what he did, no nigga from New York City was safe in Washington, D.C. They was trying to murder anything from New York City. Thus, as I said before, that D.C. is not a place that basically is open to outsiders that came there and hustled. They wasn't open to none of that. Everybody that came in the hustle, they basically tried to kill them, run them out, or whatever the case be. The only set of people that actually was able to settle in Washington, D.C. and hustle with no big problem was Jamaicans. Yep, was Jamaicans. Because we had a different type of respect. They had a different type of respect for us. So they know we wasn't playing. They know we was about that gunplay. So basically, they kind of back up off of us. But at the same time, Jamaicans still was losing their life as well. Because you had them dudes who came there and thought it was sweet. Like I had a homeboy that from Jamaica, from my hometown, R.I.P., he ain't no longer living because he didn't listen. He was from the Tar Spanish era in Spanish Town. And I told him, man, you gotta be careful with these dudes down here. He told me he's not worried about these country niggas. I said, you're not worried about these country niggas. All right, do what you do. It didn't take him more than 2 weeks, he was dead. Got sent back home in a pine box because he took the country niggas lightly. That he wanted to claim they country niggas. They wasn't no country niggas. Washington, D.C. is not a country, it's the capital of the United States. But because of his ignorance, he basically dropped his guard and basically looking at these individuals as country niggas. And these niggas is one of the most vicious niggas in the whole entire United States of A. They not to be played with. Even the federal system, they're not to be played with. So therefore, with him, he leaving from New York City, coming to DC to hustle, and he taking DC niggas lightly, and he didn't listen. He didn't listen. He lost his life 2 weeks after that from me having that conversation with him because he did not listen. You cannot take DC dudes lightly, especially when they smoke that boat. Boat is a terminology that they use for, it's actually a bombing fluid that they use, dip the cigarette into, or they dip the weed, whatever they smoking. And when they smoke that stuff, man, it's not nothing nice. It's nothing nice. Actually, if a dude's smoking dipper and he comes for you, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna kill you. If you give them $1 million or 2, 3, 4, 5 million, they still gonna kill you. They're not leaving you. And that's how their mind frame was set in Washington, D.C. They don't care how much money they get from you, they was gonna knock your head in. That's just the streets for you. A lot of dudes, some dudes was hustling in D.C., some dudes was hustling in Maryland, some dudes was hustling in Northern Virginia, but best believe this, once they entered D.C., it was a different story. Yeah, a lot of dudes got their head cracked in Northern Virginia, some dudes got their head cracked in Maryland, but D.C. was a whole different atmosphere because they was killing dudes left, right, and center in D.C. They even was killing each other. It wasn't no difference. You got that neighborhood was beefing. You got these different neighborhoods. Anywhere they see that each other is on site, they having shoots outs, all that type of stuff. But D.C. wasn't no place to be played with, man. There's a lot of money in Washington, D.C. You got dudes that made millions out of Washington, D.C. But the catch is this, a lot of dudes lost their life in Washington, D.C. I'm just one of them individuals who actually survived the streets of Washington, D.C. that was really in the streets, you know? So I'm just letting y'all youngsters know out there that who think y'all know the streets and know what's going on. You really don't know what's going on because there's more to this story. There's more to the story than you know. At a time where D.C. was actually a whole lot of murder was going on in Washington, D.C., the prosecutor and the judicial system was doing their thing. They was basically, anytime you come in for a violent crime, they was giving you, and you get found guilty, they was giving you so much time. It was hard for you to make it back to these streets. They was giving you a rack of time. Yep. We talking about from murder, attempt murder, assault. They was giving you a rack of time. I'm talking about some 20, 30, 40, 50, 70 years, 80 years. Yeah, no joke, 120 years. They was going crazy. Because at the time where, actually I think it was 2000, where they abolished parole for DC prisoners, because they used to give pre-DC prisoners 2 numbers. They didn't have a sentence regime then. And by them never having a sentence regime, they done over-sentence so much individuals and send them to federal prisons. It's not even a joke. Where you have 2 individuals, one got a 35-year sentence and another one got 120 years. And the one that got 120 years have no background, never been arrested before. This is his first charge. They gave him 120 years and sent him to prison and get the next man 35 years. That I'm going to have to explain in a whole nother video. But because of the murder rate in Washington, D.C., a whole lot of dudes went to prison because they really didn't even know what was going on with the judicial system. They was really asleep. We was like the Walking Dead because we really don't know what we really need to know. You know, that's why it's so good to be educated, because if you educate yourself, you will know what's going on around you. And that's a main thing a lot of you youngsters need to understand. Education is the key, because when you basically educate yourself, nobody can go around you. Nobody can fool you. Nobody can tell you no bull crap. So you need to basically educate yourself, especially if you're in the street, because by you educating yourself, you basically have a different outlook on life and can change your path and go in a different direction, because it's so easy for you to use your life out there in these streets. Real easy. It ain't even hard, it's real easy. You can leave your house today and die just like that. Because the way Washington D.C. was, man, it was a war zone. You could basically, they doing drive-bys, they doing shooting in broad daylight. Anything can happen to you. Anything. Any dude that was in the street, they know what time it is. I'm talking about you could be standing right beside the police and get it same way. That's how DC was. It was no game out there in these streets. These streets was serious because I remember even when I was in the street of Washington D.C., dudes ain't playing no game. If dudes told you that they was gonna get you, they getting you. They don't care if police was standing right there. They was gonna kill you and possibly kill the police as well. That was the streets. That was the streets. But is it worth it? No. At the end of the day, it's not worth it because going to prison and doing a long sentence and actually enriching the judicial system, because that's all we doing. So it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. You can't basically lose, go to prison, enriching the judge and prosecutors because they the one benefiting out of this situation. You benefit the system. So you have to use your head and change your situation and turn it into a situation that is a win-win for you, not for nobody else. So I'm letting you know, youngsters, right now, you have to be a thinker, a real thinker to actually outthink the system, because you cannot let the system trick you and put you in a situation where you're a slave, because that's what they're putting you back in. They're putting you back in slavery. So you have to educate yourself so you won't be a fool to what's really going on around you, because there's a whole lot of things going on around you, especially in the streets of Washington, D.C. But as I say, man, it's not everybody that could have survived the real streets of Washington, D.C. You know, some survived it, some didn't. Hey, I'm just one of them that survived it and was able to talk about it. If you like this video, man, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and follow this movement, man. The Toppa non-black flag, man. Life with Toppa, man. I'm going to be talking about a lot of things. Keep your eyes and ears open. And also, I have the documentary coming about USP Atlanta, Only Left the Walls Could Talk, the book and documentary. And I also have the book Knockers about Washington, D.C. coming on with the documentary as well. So keep your ears and eyes open for that, man. And, you know, hit me up if you want to ask me about anything. I'm open. Chop, chop, chop.